to Alexander Titov. He's a Russia affairs analyst and a lecturer at Queen's University in Belfast, and he is in London today. Welcome to you again, Alexander. Now, the US said that there was a Black Sea ceasefire agreed, but it's not yet been implemented. And Vladimir Putin is saying for it to be implemented, he wants more things, such as the removal of banking sanctions against Russia. Donald Trump assessed that situation by saying that Putin might be deliberately delaying things. Do you think he's deliberately delaying?
Yes, I think that's the kind of Russian strategy, is to use this opportunity to extract the maximum amount of concessions from the West, and the biggest concessions would be the in terms of economic restrictions being placed in Russia since the start of the war. But I would say that it's nothing kind of to be surprised at or see as something which should scrap the whole efforts to implement the deal, because that was always going to happen. And this just shows that simply stopping the fighting and then talking it was always a very fanciful idea which was never going to work. So there always would be very complex negotiations and conditions at every stage of this process. And this is just an early indication of how these things might develop in the future.
Vladimir Putin said again, European troops, if they were put in Ukraine, I mean, Europe would put them as like peacekeepers, but he says that if they were put in Ukraine, that would bring Russia directly into conflict with NATO. But it would only bring them into conflict if Russia attacked those troops. It's unlikely, one would think, that the European forces are going to attack Russian troops. Is this just classic Vladimir Putin scaremongering?
Well, look, the idea of peacekeeping troops usually comes with the idea that they are from a neutral country, so they separate two warring sides, and them themselves being neutral ensures that there is ability to kind of continue with peacekeeping. NATO troops are not neutral, as we know that NATO has been engaged in the biggest military supplying operations to Ukraine, providing its intelligence, providing its political cover, diplomatic cover, sanctions against Russia, and so forth.
But do you think European troops would attack Russian forces?
Well, the Russian forces will not consider them to have. If you want to have European troops, you can go them straight away. I mean, there's no problem. I mean, they can just go and see what happens with them. So presumably the Europeans want to have some agreements from Russians that they can put their troops on, and the Russians saying we're not going to have the united troops. So I think this is just whole idea of them talking about it, like Macron and Stammer saying, well, Russia doesn't have a veto on this, and Russia saying no. Well, that means you just go ahead and do it. And if there is an agreement which does not include NATO troops, and then they introduce the NATO troops, that will be the end of the agreement, and they will be attacked by Russia. So I mean, the whole thing is just it's a complete non-starter. I don't know why they keep talking about it so much, the Europeans, because it's just there's no possible scenario under which they can be introduced with Russia either attacking them or ending the ceasefire. So
Alexander, Russia clearly doesn't want Europe to have any say in discussions, but at some point, isn't the Kremlin going to have to sit down and have some kind of conversation with EU leaders, for example, if only just to get Europe to drop its own sanctions against Russia?
Well, yes, I think that's the key. That Europe doesn't really want to have kind of come along with the United States kind of change of heart and trying to negotiate a peace, which would be, clearly not fully advantageous to Ukraine. Russia sees that attitude and doesn't really want to see Europeans being involved unless they play along with the American strategy, which is at the moment is not clear. They've been saying that they're not going to leave sanctions until Russia fully withdraws and so forth. So yes, I think just the basic idea of driving a wedge in between the Europeans and Americans, or driving it even further, reducing American support for Ukraine. So if the Americans try and see that this doesn't work because Russians, Ukrainians not agreeing to things, because Europeans are not playing along, then they're going to just, according to Russian thinking, they might just wash their hands and leave the whole thing behind, and then Europe will not be able to provide the same level of support as Americans do. And Ukraine will then start losing the war even faster than it is doing now. So yeah, I don't think there is a kind of a huge amount of expectations or that Europeans suddenly will come along and start, playing ball. But that's in itself, the way I see it, is not necessarily a bad thing. As I said, the key thing is the United States here, and Europeans will either have to come along with it or face dealing with the whole war by themselves, which obviously they don't want to do either.
We've just seen the EU Commission President Ursula von der Leyen leaving that meeting there in Paris, so we anticipate we'll hear something as to whether they've come to a conclusion, and Olaf Scholz on his way too. Clearly, they've ended proceedings for now. We'll find out if they've agreed anything very shortly, I'm sure. Our correspondent and Peter Allen's keeping us updated. That's Alexander Titov is my guest, Russia Affairs analyst. Thank you to you.